I counted the footsteps above my head. 7 steps from the hallway to the bathroom. But Sarah wasn't home. Let me explain how this nightmare began. My sister Sarah and I have been sharing this old 2-story Victorian house in the Hawthorne district of Portland since she graduated from University of Oregon last spring. The place has character, high ceilings, original hardwood floors, and those old-fashioned radiators that clank and hiss through the night. The rent's manageable at $1,800 split between us, and the neighborhood's safe enough that I can walk to campus at Portland State in 20 minutes. She works downtown at a small marketing firm that specializes in local businesses. It's been a good arrangement for both of us. Sarah's always been the responsible one. 3 years older than me, she landed her job right out of college and immediately started building what our parents call a real life. Meanwhile, I'm grinding through my senior year in communications, working part-time at Powell's Books to cover my half of expenses. We've found our rhythm in the house. She gets the larger bedroom upstairs. I have the smaller one downstairs near the kitchen. We share the main bathroom upstairs, though there's a tiny half bath off the kitchen that I use most mornings. Everything was normal until that Tuesday night in early November. Portland had been hit with its first real cold snap of the season, and I could hear the radiators working overtime as I settled in for another late study session. I'd been cramming for my sociology midterm. Professor Martinez's exams were notorious for their detail-oriented questions about obscure theorists. Sarah had mentioned over dinner that she'd be staying late at the office to finish materials for a campaign launch. Some local coffee roaster was opening a second location, and they needed everything ready for a morning presentation. I finally called it quits around 11:30, my eyes burning from staring at my laptop screen. The house felt particularly quiet that night. No sound from Sarah's room, no glow from her window when I'd glanced outside earlier. She was probably still at the office, running on her 3rd or 4th cup of coffee and sheer determination. I fell asleep easily enough, exhausted from the day, but something pulled me from sleep around 2:15 in the morning. My mouth felt parched, that uncomfortable dryness that comes from breathing through your mouth while sleeping. The radiator in my room had been working overtime, making the air thick and dry. I padded upstairs to the kitchen in my bare feet, the old hardwood floors creaking softly under my weight. Each step produced a small groan from the boards, something I'd grown accustomed to but still noticed in the deep quiet of night. The kitchen was dark, except for the blue glow of the microwave clock and the ambient light filtering through the window from the street lamp outside. Mrs. Chen next door had installed one of those motion sensor lights, and it had been triggered by something, probably the gray tabby cat that roamed the neighborhood. I filled a glass from the tap, drinking slowly while looking out the window. The water was cold and tasted faintly of the old pipes, but it felt good against my dry throat. That's when I heard it, a faint sound drifting down from upstairs. The upstairs bathroom light was on. From where I stood at the kitchen sink, I had a clear view of the staircase and the upper hallway. Warm yellow light spilled out from under the bathroom door, casting a rectangular glow across the dark hardwood floor above. The sound was subtle but unmistakable, a soft sniffling, like someone trying to cry quietly and failing, the kind of muffled sobs that people make when they're trying not to wake others but can't quite contain their emotions. This wasn't entirely unusual. Sarah had been going through what she called adjustment periods since her breakup with Marcus 6 months earlier. Marcus had been her college boyfriend. They'd dated for 2 years and had even talked about moving in together after graduation. When he took a job in Seattle instead, choosing his career over their relationship, it hit Sarah harder than she liked to admit. I'd found her crying over old photos more than once, usually late at night when she thought I was asleep. Sometimes it was triggered by a song, sometimes by a romantic comedy on Netflix, sometimes by nothing at all. Grief, I'd learned, doesn't follow a schedule. I finished my water and started back toward the stairs, planning to just return to my room. Sarah was probably having another one of her Marcus nights, and I'd learned through trial and error that it was better to let her work through these moments alone, unless she specifically asked for company. The few times I'd tried to comfort her, she'd appreciated the gesture, but clearly preferred to process her emotions privately. But as I reached the bottom of the staircase, something made me pause. Sarah's bedroom door was slightly ajar, unusual for her, as she was particular about privacy, and I could see that her bedside lamp was still on. That struck me as odd. Sarah was meticulous about her nighttime routine, and she always turned off her lamp when she got up to use the bathroom. Curiosity got the better of me. I crept quietly up the stairs, avoiding the step that creaked loudly, and approached her doorway. Through the crack in the door, I could make out her form on the bed. Sarah was lying on her left side, facing away from the door. Her long brown hair was spread across the pillow in the way it naturally fell when she slept. Her phone was still in her right hand, though the screen was dark. Her breathing was deep and even, the unmistakable rhythm of someone in REM sleep. She was wearing her favorite oversized Oregon Ducks t-shirt, the faded green one she'd had since sophomore year, and refused to throw away despite the small hole near the hem. Her laptop was closed on the nightstand, positioned exactly where she always placed it. I could see the empty ceramic mug that had held her nightly chamomile tea, a habit she'd developed in college to help with anxiety. Everything about the scene suggested she'd been asleep for hours. My blood went cold. If Sarah was clearly asleep in her room, who was in the upstairs bathroom? I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart suddenly pounding so hard I was certain it would wake her. The bathroom light was still on, still casting that warm yellow glow across the hallway floor. The soft crying sounds continued, muffled but definitely real. Had I imagined it? No, I was certain of what I was hearing. That soft, intermittent sniffling that I'd automatically attributed to my sister having another emotional moment. Maybe she'd been up there earlier and simply forgotten to turn off the light. But that didn't make sense either. Sarah was almost obsessive about energy conservation, a habit drilled into her by our environmentally conscious mother. She'd rather walk across the house in the dark than leave a light on unnecessarily. I forced myself to move, backing away from Sarah's doorway as quietly as possible. Every instinct screamed at me to go down the hall and check the bathroom, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. Instead, I retreated downstairs to the living room and sat on the edge of our second-hand couch, staring up at the ceiling. The house was completely silent now, except for the usual sounds, the settling noises of old wood, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car passing on the street outside. No more sniffling, no sounds of movement from upstairs. But that light remained on. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 or 40 minutes. My phone showed 3:02 a.m. when I finally checked. The bathroom light had remained on the entire time. I kept expecting to hear footsteps, the creak of the bathroom door opening, some sign of whoever was up there. But there was nothing. Eventually, exhaustion began to overtake my fear, and I crept back to my room. I closed the door and, feeling somewhat ridiculous but unable to help myself, pushed my desk chair under the handle, something I hadn't done since I was 12 and convinced there were monsters in the closet. I lay in bed with my ears straining for any sound from upstairs, but the house remained quiet. When I finally drifted off, it was nearly 4 in the morning. I woke up at 7:30 to the familiar sound of Sarah's alarm going off upstairs. She was moving around her room with her usual morning efficiency. I could hear her opening and closing drawers, the sound of hangers sliding across the closet rod. Everything seemed completely normal. I heard her shower running, in the downstairs bathroom. She always used that one in the mornings because the water pressure was significantly better. After she left for work around 8:15, I worked up the courage to check the upstairs bathroom. The door was unlocked. I turned the handle slowly, half expecting to find someone still inside, but the small room was completely empty. The light switch was off now, though I was absolutely certain it had been on all night. The bathroom appeared untouched. No water droplets in the white porcelain sink, no condensation on the mirror, no damp towels hanging on the rack. It looked like it hadn't been used in hours, but there was something that made my skin crawl. On the mirror above the sink, there were faint smudge marks near the bottom edge, right about where someone's fingertips might rest if they were leaning close to look at their reflection. The marks were subtle, barely visible unless you were specifically looking for them, but they were definitely there, and they appeared fresh, the kind of smudges that appear when someone touches a clean mirror with slightly damp or oily fingers. I knew for a fact those marks hadn't been there before. Sarah was meticulous about cleaning, especially the bathrooms. She'd wiped down that mirror just 2 days earlier during her weekly cleaning routine, using Windex and paper towels until it was spotless. I'd actually watched her do it while I was brushing my teeth. Those fingerprints were new. I spent the rest of the morning trying to rationalize what had happened. Maybe Sarah had gotten up during the night, and I'd somehow missed it. Maybe she'd used the bathroom while I was getting water, and I'd just assumed she was asleep when I looked in her room. People can move quietly when they're half asleep, and maybe I'd misread the situation entirely. But deep down, I knew that wasn't what had happened. I'd seen her sleeping. Her breathing had been too deep, too regular for someone who had just laid down. The way her hair fell across the pillow, the position of her phone in her hand, everything suggested she'd been asleep for some time. And given how creaky our floors were, she would have heard me moving around downstairs. That evening, I made sure to pay attention to Sarah's bedtime routine. She turned in around 11 o'clock, after watching the Office reruns in the living room, something that had become a nightly ritual for her. I stayed up until midnight, reading in my room, and the upstairs bathroom light never came on. But it started happening again. Not every night, but maybe once or twice a week. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, always between 2 and 3 a.m., and see that familiar yellow glow from upstairs. I developed a routine. First, I'd check Sarah's room. Every single time she was sound asleep in her bed, in various positions, but always clearly deep in sleep. After confirming she was in her room, I'd go downstairs to the living room and wait. Sometimes I'd hear the soft crying sounds, sometimes just silence. But the light would stay on for anywhere from 20 minutes to over an hour before finally going dark. I never worked up the courage to go upstairs during one of these episodes. Something about the whole situation felt deeply wrong, like I was witnessing something I wasn't supposed to see. The fear wasn't rational, but it was overwhelming and primal. During the day, I'd check the bathroom. Sometimes it looked completely normal. Sometimes there were those faint fingerprint smudges on the mirror. Once, I found a single long brown hair in the sink, the same color and texture as Sarah's. But when I casually asked her about it, she insisted she hadn't used that bathroom in several days. I started researching the history of our house online. According to county records, it was built in 1952 by a family named the Hendersons. William and Margaret Henderson had lived there for 31 years before selling to the Kowalski family in 19... The Kowalskis owned it for 15 years before our current landlord, Mr. Patterson, bought it as a rental property in 19... I couldn't find any records of deaths, accidents, or traumatic events associated with the address. I even visited the Multnomah County Library and dug through old newspaper archives, looking for any mention of our address. No obituaries listing the house, no crime reports, no unusual incidents, just a normal house with a normal history. The logical part of my brain kept trying to find explanations. Maybe there were electrical issues causing the light to turn on by itself. Old houses were notorious for quirky wiring. Maybe the house had some kind of ventilation problem that created sounds resembling crying. Maybe I was experiencing some form of sleep disorder that caused me to hallucinate or misremember events. But I knew what I was seeing and hearing. The breaking point came last Thursday night. I'd been studying late for my statistics final and didn't get to bed until almost 1 a.m. Sarah had gone out with her coworkers, some kind of birthday celebration for Jenny, the graphic designer at her firm. They'd planned to hit a few bars in the Pearl District. Sarah had texted me around 11:30 saying she was getting an Uber home and would probably be back within the hour. I was just drifting off to sleep when I heard her key in the front door. The familiar sequence of sounds, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors, the soft thud of her purse hitting the small table in the entryway. I heard her go to the kitchen, probably getting a glass of water and maybe some ibuprofen for the inevitable morning headache. After a few minutes, I heard her footsteps going upstairs. I fell asleep to the familiar sounds of her nighttime routine. But I woke up again at 2:47. I remember checking my phone specifically. That yellow glow was spilling down from upstairs again, and I could hear the soft crying sounds, more pronounced this time. Following my usual routine, I got up to check Sarah's room first. Her door was wide open this time, and I could see her bed clearly in the light from the hallway. The bed was empty. The covers were pulled back, but no one was there. Relief flooded through me like a physical sensation. Of course, Sarah was the one in the bathroom. She'd come home from her night out, and now she was having an emotional moment. Maybe the alcohol had made her nostalgic, or maybe something had happened with her coworker. Maybe Jenny had said something about Marcus, or maybe seeing everyone else paired off had triggered her own loneliness. It all made perfect sense. I went back to my room, feeling foolish for all the anxiety I'd built up over the past few weeks. There was a simple, logical explanation after all. My sister was human. She had emotions, and sometimes those emotions surfaced at inconvenient times. But as I was settling back into bed, I heard the front door open. The same sequence of sounds as before. Heels on hardwood, purse hitting the entryway table, footsteps going to the kitchen. I checked my phone. It was 3:12 a.m. Sarah's voice drifted up from downstairs, slightly slurred from drinking. "Hey, sorry I'm so late. Jenny kept buying rounds and we lost track of time." I heard her footsteps coming up the stairs, heard her pause outside the bathroom door. "Why is the light on?" she said, more to herself than to me, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet house. The bathroom light went out. 5 minutes later, I heard her bedroom door close. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I tried to casually ask Sarah about her evening. She'd gotten home around 3:15, she said, feeling terrible about how late it was. She'd had more to drink than planned and felt awful. She couldn't remember much about the Uber ride home, but she was pretty sure she'd come straight upstairs and gone to bed. She didn't mention finding the bathroom light on. Since that night, I've been watching more carefully. I've started keeping a notebook, documenting every occurrence. The pattern is always the same. The light comes on between 2 and 3 a.m. Stays on for 20 to 60 minutes, sometimes with crying sounds, sometimes without. Sarah is always asleep in her room when it happens. Always, until last night. Last night, I woke up at 2:38 and saw the familiar yellow glow upstairs. I went to check Sarah's room first, as had become my habit. But this time, her room was empty. Her bed hadn't been slept in. The covers were still pulled up, her pillows arranged exactly as she left them. I remembered suddenly. She'd mentioned she was staying overnight at her friend Jessica's place for a girls' weekend. They were driving up to Seattle to visit another friend from college, someone named Amanda who worked for Microsoft. The bathroom light was on, and I could hear the soft crying sounds. Sarah wasn't home. Sarah was 3 hours away in Seattle. I'm writing this now at 3:41 a.m., sitting at my desk, looking up at that yellow glow spilling across the upstairs hallway. It's been on for over an hour now. The crying stopped about 15 minutes ago, but I can hear something else now. Footsteps. Soft, careful footsteps moving around in the bathroom. 7 steps from the hallway to the bathroom. I've counted them 100 times during daylight hours. 7 steps, always 7 steps. But tonight I counted them above my head. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to call. I don't know if I should go upstairs or run out of the house, or just wait for morning. The footsteps have stopped, but the light is still on.